Well, when I was in high school, I needed a job, and my mom had found an ad in the local paper advising that the local hospital was going to be running a course to train nurses' aides, and afterwards you'd be offered a job. So I went for the course, I was offered the job, and I did that throughout high school and college. Despite the fact that I was a serious musician, ultimately I would go to nursing school, and honestly it's a career decision I've never regretted. It's a very rewarding work, and although heart-wrenching at times, I have no regrets.
It was something I always wanted to do. I wanted to help people and make a difference in their lives, either through education or just helping them heal.
I became a nurse. I've always been drawn to people who are in pain and people who are vulnerable. Their pain always resonated deep with me. And so I always knew that I would be in a healing profession, but I didn't know it was going to be nursing. I was a ballet dancer my whole life, and I went to study acting in New York. And right before I moved, my grandmother, who I was very close with my whole life, suffered 2 brain aneurysms, and she had a 0% chance of survival. And I was able to participate with her quite a bit during her therapies at Sunnyview. And watching her rediscover herself and fight, and just being a part of that healing experience really impacted me and moved me profoundly. I then went to New York, and you know, the work I did, you know, regardless of what it was, just there was always something missing, and so I just decided that after 8 years, it was time. So I decided to move home. I took care of her, and I went to nursing school.
Well, I actually can't say that I did not have an aha moment. My first year of college, I studied political science, and at the end of that first year, I decided that I thought maybe I'd like to switch to nursing. I am very much a people person. I love people, which really kind of works out because at St. Peter's we practice people-centered care. I also love the human experience. I love to know where people come from and what motivates them. And I'm kind of have a little bit of a soft spot in my heart for the vulnerable. So I kind of, once again, it's one of our mission statements at St. Peter's, so it's, you know, I started nursing and I grew with it, and more than anything, it grew me.
I became a nurse because the universe told me to. I resisted at first. In the 7th grade, I decided I wanted to be a math teacher. I even went as far as getting my bachelor's degree in mathematics, but I hated it. And a little voice inside my head, otherwise known as my mother, convinced me to go to nursing school. So 30 years later, here I am doing what I was meant to do, because to me, nursing isn't just a profession, it's a calling.
Well, that's an easy question. I grew up in a town that had a state hospital. Small town, almost everybody I worked with knew, everybody I knew, grew up with, worked at the hospital. I had some excellent role models, both my parents, my older brother. They're the ones that convinced me that I should go work there as a nursing assistant to see if I really liked the profession. And I fell in love with it. It was my first exposure to the geriatric population, and that is pretty much where my career has taken me throughout the rest of my 30+ years.
I don't think there was ever a question of why I became a nurse. I think I was born to be a nurse. I started out at a small age of actually having an invisible friend named Carol Shell, and she had no arms or no legs. So I had to take care of her and bring her everywhere with me. So I think I was just born to take care of people.
Well, there's many, but there was Mr. C, who was a Vietnam veteran who was being treated for cancer, and he found himself very far from his Florida home. As his disease advanced despite treatment, he ended up enrolling in hospice, and he came under my palliative care service. He was a musician, and he lamented that he was so far from his instruments. So through a Facebook post, I was able to find him a guitar. And I took that guitar along with my own fiddle to visit him one day in his room. And when I arrived, he was already terminally delirious. Despite that, he was able to pick up the guitar and play me some Skinnerd and sing the song Curtis Lowe. His son then took the guitar and he played while I sang Simple Man. They then allowed me to share some of my own old-time music and song on my fiddle. Everybody was just delighted because he had missed his music so much, yet as a nurse and a musician, I was able to bring that to him. Within a day, he took a turn for the worse and ultimately died. And I didn't really fully impact, the full impact of that did not hit me until I got to his funeral. And when I walked in the church, the pipe organ was playing the old-time fiddle music that I played and sang. So it obviously made a huge impact on the family. And to this day, the son calls me annually at the time his father died and thanks me and tells me he didn't just lose his father that day, he lost his best friend.
I've been a nurse for over 30 years, so I could write a book for all the memorable moments. I just think of all the students that have come to me for assistance, whether it was personal, death of a parent, or death of a grandparent, or a child during their curriculum as they were in school. And now afterwards, we're still friends with so many. I'm still friends with so many of them. It's an honor and a privilege to have met so many wonderful people, men and women, as I educate them to be nurses.
I would have to say I took care of a young couple. He was recently diagnosed with multiple myeloma, and he was admitted for complications from treatment. And I think probably 3 times in 6 months. And I got to know him and his wife very well. We became very close. He had the most beautiful, innocent blue eyes, and she was there just faithfully all the time. When she wasn't working, they were there. And they wanted to fight and beat this no matter what, and regardless. And over that time, during his last admission, he was starting to succumb to the cancer, and we talked a lot about a lot of things, and we talked about quality of life. We talked about different scenarios. If you want to continue with treatment, this could be how you're going to spend the rest of your days. And they were resolved in the fact that they were going to fight. And I'll never forget, I left them alone after that conversation for a little while, just to talk. And I came back down to check on them, and I heard counting coming from the room, and I thought, what are they counting? And his goal was just to be able to walk again. And I peered in just to check, and I saw her standing at the bedside, and he had his feet rested on top of hers, and she was lifting them, and they were doing leg lifts and counting just to get back his strength. And it impacted me on such a, it just moved me. And I don't know, I keep in touch with her to this day, and patients thank us, but I think that they deserve the thanks. They ask us to be more than what we are, and I thank them.
I think probably any of us interviewed would say that it's hard to tab or narrow down one moment. My nursing career was about moments, great moments, happy moments, sad moments. They really involved a lot of people, patients, families. I think that really what has mattered to me most is that I take care of my patients, I provide quality care, that I understand their human experience and where they come from, and that I develop the people under me. That's always been very important to me, and that's been very, very rewarding. I've worked with great people for a great institution for my entire career, and it's just been a great time.
My most memorable moment happened on January 6, 2016, as I anxiously stood in the cold, awaiting the nurses to come out from the hospital. My heart was overjoyed as they poured out and entered the picket line. We had made a difficult decision weeks ahead to go on strike for our patients and for their safety, and I was overjoyed when we did that. And I realized that we were not only fighting for our patients, we were fighting for all patients, we were fighting for all communities, and we were fighting for the conditions of the nurses as a profession. And I realized then that if we stood hand in hand, that our hearts would be heard and our voices would be strong to advocate for our patients.
Well, again, 30 plus years, that's kind of hard to narrow it down. But I will say, working at the nursing home at Saratoga Hospital was just everything I always wanted to do. We did close the nursing home in 2016, which was one of the hardest things I've done. But the hospital, my senior team, was willing to let me create a position that allows me to still work with that population. And even though it's now, it is going to be the best memory I've ever had. Being able to work with that, being trusted, and the confidence they had in me, and being able to work with the patients, their families, the community. It is, and again, this honor also falls into that memory time.
I think it would have to do with an individual that I served for the last 30 years of my career, and most recently sat with him at the bedside while he was dying and talking to him about his God and his heaven, and looking forward to his death and meeting his God, and having the family ask me to read at his funeral felt like such an honor. It was beautiful.